here a panel to talk about Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and the biotech cluster that is developing around Johns Hopkins. My name is Michael Rosen, and I'm with Forest City Science and Technology Group, and our company is building the Science Park at Johns Hopkins. And we are fortunate to have with us today a member of Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, as well as 3 of the biotech companies that are in the Johns Hopkins Science Park. Before I start, though, I would like to introduce the Secretary for Business and Economic Development for the state of Maryland, Christian Johansson.
Michael, thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today. A little bit over a decade ago, I was working, actually a little less than a decade ago, I was working at an organization called the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore. And at that time, there was a huge amount of excitement around the possibilities for what a park on the #1 hospital in America for 21 years running, #1 NIH recipient in the United States, probably for at least a decade, could do in transforming a neighborhood, in creating jobs, and life-saving treatments. Let me tell you, if you go over today, you will see hundreds of people at work. You will find a community that's in the process of being revitalized, and you will find cutting-edge science and technologies. And that's part of the Maryland story, because Maryland's story is one of leadership when it comes to life sciences. And Johns Hopkins, the park that you guys are creating, the companies that are going into it, are very much a part of defining who we are, of really setting the bar that this is a great state to do business in. And this is a state that is serious about life sciences. Most of you know our strengths and assets. I've already mentioned some of the great research institutions, and we include Maryland in that as well, that are in the state. But the fact is, when it comes to federal facilities, whether it's the FDA or the NIH, or the 50 others that are there, many of them dealing with cutting-edge science, especially with life sciences, we are at the epicenter for that type of research, #1 in the United States. Now, when it comes to looking at this as a state, you have to ask the question, we have a lot of resources here, but why is it so important to us? And why is it so important to Governor O'Malley? Let me tell you why. Because from 2002 to 2010, 1/3 of all net new jobs that were created were in life sciences. That's our future. That's the bleeding edge of growth. That's where we want to be. That's where we need to go. And that's why the governor created the Life Science Advisory Board, which launched a plan, a $1.3 billion decade plan to take us forward. We've spent or allocated $400 million of those monies. And we are serious about growing this industry. Let me just tell you a few things that we are doing that are moving the needle, that'll be relevant to any company thinking about doing business in the state or locating in this park. First off, we recognize that places like Johns Hopkins are world leading at research, but researchers often need help in pushing in innovation from research to where you can get seed stage capital. So the state is making bets. We're making 40 to 50 bets through Innovate Maryland coming up this year on promising technologies, and it's grant bets that they'll move at least 10% out into the marketplace where they can receive venture money. Second, we're following that up with $84 million of state capital that we're going to be investing directly into some of the most promising companies in the state. And we hope, we expect, I can promise you, many of them will be companies coming out of your institution and hopefully locating that BioPark. And third, for anybody who wants to invest, we're continuing the incentive for the Maryland Biotechnology Tax Credit that has yielded $80 million in investment for early stage biotech firms. So that continuum of capital, if you listen to that panel today, everybody talked about financing and how do you grow your business. We are putting our money where our mouth is, and basically what we're looking at is innovation to commercialization, to company formation, to job creation, and there's dollars along every step of the way from the state of Maryland. So please consider us. We're so proud and pleased to have Hopkins be a centerpiece of our life sciences balance sheet, and we're excited to hear from all the companies here. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you so much, Christian. And thank Judy Britz as well, Executive Director of the Maryland Center for Biotechnology, for all your support and the state of Maryland's support in building this cluster. I have today as your panel, esteemed panel in front of me, three executives from three of the life science companies that have spun out of Johns Hopkins. To my immediate right is President of Biomarker Strategies, Scott Alaco. To his immediate right is Dr. Ignacio Pino, who is CEO of a company called CDI Labs. CDI is Custom Designed Immunologics, originally started in Puerto Rico outside with Hopkins Technology, and now moving into the Science Park as we speak. And then finally, Tony Newton, representing as Head of Business Development for a company called PGDX, Personalized Genomic Diagnostics. Tony, 20-year executive with Genzyme, was Vice President of Oncology, and now heavily involved with a cancer diagnostics company. And then finally, representing Johns Hopkins, Helen Montag, who's Senior Director for Corporate Relations at Johns Hopkins. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to tell a little bit about their company and their linkage to Hopkins and why they're at Hopkins.
Hello, my name is Scott Alaco of BioPark Strategies. First, I want to thank DBED, Christian, and Judy for being here today. And most importantly, I just wanted to echo how important it is to have the support of the governor, the administration, and the state legislature in promoting programs to encourage companies like mine and those of us today to locate in Maryland and build, expand. It's really a great place to be. That also runs true with Forest City and the building that we're in at the Hopkins Biotech Park, which is really a state-of-the-art facility. I believe I'm one of the first corporate private company tenants in that building. Some of our new neighbors are here today as well. Real quickly, Biomarker Strategies is developing a novel technology that is trying to move pathology into the 21st century. For those of you that might be familiar with tumor analysis and pathology, the methods that are being used currently to preserve your tumor after it comes out of your body were developed during the American Civil War. And we do not believe that type of technology is really ideal for 21st century molecular diagnostics. So in a nutshell, Biomarker Strategies has developed a platform called SnapPath, which is designed to enable the testing and analysis of live human tumors to develop predictive tests to predict patient response to targeted cancer therapies. And I'm pleased to report that our first human clinical studies are taking place at Hopkins and at the University of Pennsylvania. And we are well underway as a result of the support that we've had both from Forest City and the state and our investors to make progress in enabling personalized medicine.
Hello everybody, my name is Ignacio Pino. Like Michael said, I'm the CEO of CDI Laboratories, Custom Designed Immunologics. The company was founded about 3 years ago, and basically the key technological components, a whole human proteome microarray developed by High Throughput Biology Center investigators at Johns Hopkins. The company has used that tool to generate platforms for both the generation of highly ultra-specific antibodies that are impacting researchers already, while we are also developing prognostic and diagnostic tools and research tools using these antibodies. We also use our proteome microarray technology for the discovery of biomarkers, mainly in the area of autoimmune diseases. We're currently expanding. We started our project with a seedling funding in Puerto Rico, where we took advantage of the high-quality labor to do a big, large-scale cell culturing component that we needed to get this project off the ground. And now we're starting our office laboratory at Wrangell's here at Johns Hopkins, where we're going to manufacture the key component, the microarray, and we're going to also develop future products out of this site. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Tony Newton. I'm with Personal Genome Diagnostics, or PGDX as we shorten it. This is a lab or company that was spun out of the Bert Vogelstein Ken Kinzer lab at Johns Hopkins. And the two founders are Victor Belculescu and Luis Diaz, who are two researchers in the lab. They continue their work in the lab, and it really sort of maintains a very strong link between the Kinzer Vogelstein lab and the company. The company was started in 2010. It was really started because there was a lot of demand from outside for collaborations, and also from individual physicians and patients for whole exome genome testing. So what we've done is we've set up a facility where we can take patient samples, or we can take research samples, process them through, and provide very detailed whole genome analysis. The Kinzer Vogelstein lab were really the pioneers in this area. They were the first to sequence the whole cancer genome. There's extensive experience in looking at cancer genomic information. So we can apply all this information to individual patients or to research studies. Right now we're offering services to companies and to patients. I think in the future for this lab, this will be really almost a test bed type lab where we can take discoveries from the Hopkins lab, commercialize them, test them in the real world, and really apply them for benefit of patients and for companies outside.
Hi, I'm Helen Montag. I'm Senior Director for Corporate Relations for Johns Hopkins. Very happy to be here today representing Johns Hopkins. I will say there's no place we'd rather be than the state of Maryland. That we work closely with Judy Ritz and Christian Johansson, the state of Maryland, and we're very appreciative of their support. And there's no better partner for us than Forest City. They make a great research partner for us, for a place to put our companies. I have been involved with this project since the very beginning. My office is located within technology transfer, and in support of our entrepreneurial faculty, we run a number of programs designed to help faculty who want to think about starting a company. We run something called the Johns Hopkins Alliance for Science and Technology Development, which is a program that brings high-level business executives to our campus one day each fall to hear faculty with inventions and help them decide what to do with these inventions. We also run more informal programs. One is called Mind and Venture, one is called Science Without Borders. These are programs to let companies, whether they're from other countries or just out, Baltimore itself, talk about what they do and how they could partner with our programs. We run an investor conference. We've done one in oncology, one in neuroscience, and one in cardiac imaging. Those are events designed to showcase the business done at Hopkins and to send the message that we're open for business. And I would invite anybody who wants to be on the mailing list to hear about more of these programs to come up, just give me your business card and let me know. We are always looking for business partners. We're always out there excited to meet new people. I see a number of my colleagues from Technology Transfer out there. And we're delighted you're here and welcome the opportunity to work with you. Thank you very much.
So I would like to ask our panelists a little bit more about, so you're all basically being in the Science Park and basically connected by Skybridge to Johns Hopkins. And you're able to go back and forth into Hopkins and different parts of Hopkins. How valuable is collaborating, now that you've got your company set up, the day-to-day collaborative activities with Hopkins, and what kind of collaborations are you doing within Hopkins today?
There are multiple advantages to being located at the Biotech Park. Our co-founder is Dr. Douglas Clark, who was the head of cytopathology at Johns Hopkins. He maintains his professorship there and is on service on occasion. So there's that. That is essential to many of the Hopkins-based spinouts that need to maintain a relationship with their scientific founder. That's obviously a critical point. Another key component is the access to some of the centralized services that Hopkins offers both internally and externally to the companies at the Biotech Park. And then I think it's also true that there's a growing sense of collaboration within the companies at the Biotech Park. There's a company called Champions Biotechnology that is also in our building, and we are working with them on some very interesting scientific areas of collaboration. So, I think at multiple levels, there's a real great base of support and enthusiasm, not to mention the job availability of employees that have a scientific background because of Hopkins and the University of Maryland being nearby.
Yeah, I mean, literally we've timed how long it takes from the HIT Center to our new facility at Rangos, and it takes us 4 minutes to walk from the HIT Center to our facility. And that's very important for us because we are in the process right now of transferring the manufacturing of a very complex protein microarray that has 17,000 individually purified proteins on it. It's almost an art how to do this. And now we're going to be able to do it basically 5 minutes away from our founders, from the inventors of the technology. So this is critical for us at this moment in order to successfully transfer the technology to the company. Then on the collaboration front, we're actually in the middle of a negotiation, or sending a draft back and forth with the pathology department to have a blanket agreement so that we can exchange and transfer these antibodies that we generate with this microarray right into the pathologist's hands, so they can start identifying hopefully new biomarkers or creating new panels that we can then hopefully license back and commercialize.
Yeah, I would mention two things, I think. One is this great space to be in. It's a very nice building, lots of space available. So as we grow, we've seen some nice extra space we can move into in a very flexible way. The second, I think perhaps more important, is the relationship with the university tech transfer office has been great. So it's a very easy, seamless process to license in technology, patents that we need for the business. This is a very fast-moving field. There's been a lot of new stuff being developed within the Hopkins community, and we really need to access that and be able to actually apply it in the marketplace. So being able to see that technology, to license it without long, protracted, difficult negotiations is a huge benefit.
So this is a question for Helen, Johns Hopkins. Helen, Hopkins for years had an image of being a very conservative, particularly towards industry, very conservative university, didn't partner a lot with industry, and that has seemed to have changed radically in the last 5 years. Why? What's happening within Hopkins? Can you tell us? And you can see just the number of startups that are happening at Hopkins. 5 years ago, as Christian said, Hopkins is the #1 in terms of NIH funding in the United States, but that never translated into companies. 5 years ago, Hopkins was only developing maybe 3 companies a year. Last year, Hopkins had 19 companies. What's changed within Hopkins?
I don't know that I can point to any one thing, but I believe cultural change takes a long time, and it's really happened. For example, one of the things that we consider when faculty have advancement, we now consider entrepreneurship in the positive column. I think in the old days, it was kind of considered a negative. Working with industry was seen as getting your hands a little bit dirty. That's not true today. We have faculty who've gone out and started companies. Elias Rahuni, who went on to Sanofi Aventis and was at Hopkins for many years, started companies, and also climbed academically. We have lots of models like Elias. So faculty are seeing that they can do both. They can both have an academic career and they can work with industry. So the university is supporting them. And I think also in terms of NIH funding, that is flatlining. And that means that we have to look to industry partners. So reality is hitting home, and people have to consider options for support that they haven't considered in the past. And this is all happening while we have a business school forming, with a full-time MBA program that we never had before. So we have young entrepreneurs around, people with MBAs who want to help technologies out to the marketplace. So a lot of forces are coming together and making Hopkins and Baltimore, the state of Maryland, a much more entrepreneurial place than it ever has been historically. This is all very positive, and I think coming from a very high level, there's support both from the president. We have a new dean of the School of Medicine starting in July, and we've already met with him, and he has assured us that he is supportive of our efforts to work with industry, and he'd like to see even more of those. So I think from a very high level, Hopkins is committed to, continuing what we're doing and doing even more of it.
I neglected to mention something that I've mentioned in every series of remarks I've done since I've been here. And I want to build on Helen's point, because, drum roll please, last week, the state of Maryland was ranked #1 in the country for innovation and entrepreneurship by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And yeah, you give yourself a friend. And let me say that there was a number of things. Obviously, they decided to invest Maryland and innovate Maryland as part of that. But there's more than that, and Hopkins and the culture change that's occurring there is a piece of that puzzle and a part of that story and a part of that narrative. And so we're very proud of it, and it's really a team Maryland, a team Bio Maryland coming together to make that #1 ranking.
So yesterday, Hopkins made an announcement right here about a collaboration with the largest German research institution, the Fraunhofer Institute. And as part of that, Hopkins had to go to Germany and not just wait for a company to come to Baltimore. Hopkins went to Germany several times to establish that relationship. And the state of Maryland was intimately involved in that. Helen, can you talk a little bit about that relationship, and where will that, what is the focus of that relationship with Fraunhofer, and how will that help our community?
Sure. For those of you who don't know, the Fraunhofer Institute is an applied German research institute, very successful. They have over 80 different sites in the country of Germany. They also are eager to work in the United States, and they have a number of branches at universities. As it happens, Bill Hartman, who's the president of Fraunhofer USA, has been working hard for many years with Hopkins to try to grow relationships. And in the past 5 years, we had 3 projects going. They bring engineering know-how. Really what they have is applied engineering skills. We have incredible clinical knowledge, clinicians of all sorts. And the current project will marry their clinical skills, a chip that they've invented where they can put all kinds of interesting information with our clinicians who need to diagnose it. So we'll find the disease that we want to diagnose either from one of the orifices in the body, and they'll put their information, their data on that chip to help us diagnose that disease. And we hope will change the nature of patient care, so that instead of there having to be blood tests or other invasive procedures, you'll be able to tell with this simple diagnostic device whether a disease exists with great reliability, and to begin treatment earlier. In terms of public health implications, this could have very broad implications because of some very big public health diseases that are problems that if they're diagnosed early, can be treated early. So we feel very fortunate to have Fraunhofer as a partner. The depth of their engineering and scientific knowledge is just tremendous, and they have engineers on site in the United States. It's located right here in Boston, with whom we're partnering. So we hope that their engineering know-how and our clinical efforts will marry on several fronts, that we may look for a third party to help fund these various efforts, but that it will do what we hope to always do, which is get cures out to patients even more rapidly than we have before. And because of the way the world works, we can work with German partners from very far away. They can have people here, we can go there, and we can do what helps patients find cures for diseases much more quickly than it ever has been in the past, using the strengths of both institutions.
So Johns Hopkins represents one of the leading cancer institutions in the United States. As you heard at lunchtime today from the recipient of the honorary award, there are more than 200 different types of cancers. Hopkins is known for its prowess in cancer research. 2 of our companies here are in the cancer field. Can you talk a little bit about being at one of the best cancer centers in the United States and in the world? How does that help you progress your company?
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned before, our co-founder is a pathologist on the faculty. The researchers and clinicians at Hopkins are very much focused on the cutting edge research tools and applications to interrogate cancer more effectively. And so I think there's a great willingness to try new technologies and new approaches throughout the oncology and pathology environment within the university. So, I think at a fundamental level that is essential for the key opinion leaders in the field to be working with your technology and supporting your efforts that has immense value to early stage companies like mine. Oh, I'm sorry. Our technology is, as I mentioned before, a live tumor cell testing system that is designed for solid tumors. So essentially all of the cancers other than leukemia and lymphoma. Our first target is advanced melanoma. As many of you are aware, there's a new drug that has recently been approved for advanced melanoma patients. It works very well. Unfortunately, almost all of the patients that begin that drug within a year relapse and become resistant to the drug. And so our first test application is designed to try to determine what drug those particular patients will need next after their BRAF positive tumors become resistant to the BRAF inhibitor drug. And so that is just one of many examples of how the treatment of cancer is transforming before our eyes with combination therapies that are going to be used to manage the disease, most likely, rather than cure it. But that is really a key area of development in the cancer field, is not just the development of targeted cancer therapies themselves, but what biomarker tests need to go with those specific drugs to identify the right patient populations that will respond to them. And then the next real frontier is to determine how to prescribe combinations of those therapies based on multiple different biomarkers, and that is what my company is primarily focused on trying to control.
So the Kinsler Vogelstein Lab has been one of the pioneers in cancer genomics, and many technologies developed and invented there. SAGE, which was for gene expression quantitation, digital karyotyping for copy number analysis, and then lots of technology in the area of genomic analysis. As we take this technology out to the marketplace, a whole set of new challenges actually appear from companies. One thing we've found is that companies are very limited on sample size. Many companies are looking at what are called formalin-fixed, paraffin-embedded samples from archival material. So we've done a lot of work in the lab to actually enhance the ability to look at small amounts of tissue. There's huge expertise now within our company to actually apply this technology in a real-world situation. And these are things you don't really find out unless you're in a company out dealing with the marketplace on a daily basis. The other area is in bioinformatics and analysing the data. These analyses generate huge amounts of data, which takes a lot of expertise to analyse. There's a very large knowledge base that came out of Hopkins based on all the pioneering work there that lets us have knowledge about what mutations are important, what mutations are less important, and really making sense of that data to really benefit actual patients and actual research studies. So what I see PGDX is really an interface between the real outside world and academia, where information actually flows both ways. It can flow out from academia, out from the lab to the marketplace. It also flows back again to the lab and helps the lab in really thinking through the next steps in the evolution of the research in the lab.
I should have mentioned that the molecular profiles that we're developing are also kind of next generation molecular profiles. We're looking at newly evoked phosphoproteins in the signal transduction network of living cells. And we believe that ultimately the better characterization of that signal transduction network and the pathway analysis related to it will essentially layer over the traditional DNA-based biomarker analysis that is currently in vogue. And so ultimately, the profile of the tumor will begin with the morphology by the pathologist, but will evolve into DNA characterization, perhaps gene expression profile, and then also of great importance is what we refer to as a functional signaling profile of the tumor, based on the analysis of the newly evoked phosphoproteins that occur when a living cell is exposed to targeted cancer therapies outside the body. We also refer to these as ex vivo diagnostics and biomarkers. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So monoclonal antibodies is the fastest growing therapeutic class in the pharmaceutical industry today. Ignacio Pino, how will CDI Labs activities impact the field of monoclonal antibodies?
So monoclonal antibodies basically play roles in three major areas: the research field, where they're used as tools; the diagnostics, where they're usually the major reagent in immunodiagnostics; and also in the therapeutic area, where, like you said, they're the big large molecules of success today. So specifically in the therapeutic area, our area's focus is to introduce the human proteome microarray analysis of the specificity of these molecules early in the development phase, as a way of selecting candidates that have less cross-reacting hits with other targets other than intended target, in an effort to reduce potential side effects that are related to these off-target hits. So we're talking with some major pharmaceutical companies at the moment to use this technology in their development pipeline as a way of screening out the bad apples.
So one theme you've heard today about the science cluster around Johns Hopkins is in the field of cancer. Another very important topic and theme is neuroscience. And I'd like to ask, and Johns Hopkins is known as the #1 neuroscience university in the United States and hospital. Helen Montag, could you talk about a little bit about the neuroscience cluster that is developing at the park?
Sure. So the Brain Science Institute, which is a newly formed institute funded by $100 million from an anonymous donor, is located in the first building in the biotech park. That institute hired recently a drug development team, 15 people from industry, which will allow Hopkins scientists to take drug development that much farther downstream, which will increase the ability and the odds of successful ability to work with industry. So that Brain Science Institute, which is chaired by Jeff Rothstein, is now in place right in the Rangos building. In addition to that, Hopkins was successful in recruiting the Lieber Institute, the Lieber-Maltz Institute for Schizophrenia Research, which is also another $100 million privately funded research institute. The Lieber family was a family that had a daughter with schizophrenia. As they grew to the latter part of their lives, the family decided they wanted to support schizophrenia research. They selected Hopkins in competition with 5 other peer institutions as the site of their foundation, and they've hired faculty from all over the world who have located in the Rangos building. So between the Brain Sciences Institute and the Lieber-Maltz Institute for Schizophrenia Research, just in that one building alone, there's a tremendous amount of neuroscience-related research going on. Hopkins also has the #1 rated department of neuroscience in the country. Those scientists, some of whom, or most of whom, are part of the Brain Science Institute, but it extends beyond that, work closely with researchers in the Lieber-Maltz Institute and the Brain Science Institute, and it also crosses over to the Department of Psychiatry and the Department of Neurology. So there's an awful lot of brain power working on brains right in the Rangos building. And that complements very nicely the work that's going on in cancer, so that we have those two areas of strength, in addition to a lot of very strong imaging work that goes on for both of those and other areas of strength that we can talk about a little later.
Great. So I think we are out of time. I would like to thank all of our 4 panelists: Helen Montag from Johns Hopkins, Tony Newton from Personal Genomic Diagnostics, Ignacio Pino from CDI Labs, and Scott Alaco from Biomarker Strategies, for giving us a flavor of the activities happening in the science cluster around Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Thank you very much. And Christian Johansson, thank you so much as well.